way I became acquainted with this whole exotic idea of transhumanism, I was doing research, actually. I was a writer and doing research for one of the largest U.S. newspapers out of Oklahoma. And this is maybe 20-some years ago. And doing research on the history of Halloween, of all things, and somewhere I came across a term that I had never seen before called transgenics. Now, I didn't know what transgenics was, but I could kind of put two and two together. Trans, genes, that somehow we're talking here about genetic engineering, the altering of genes. And I became fascinated with this idea because back then the science was brand new. It was not, biotechnology, nanotechnology. These were not even terms that existed. But it was following on the heels of the mapping of the human genome, which then was giving both the birth to a promise and also to the sciences that we are going to be able to do things with genetics. We'll be able to heal our bodies. We'll be able to make ourselves stronger. There was a great deal of promise that was emerging quickly, and the science to back it up, at least in theory. And so I started doing research into transgenics, and at the time it wasn't very easy to get information. The internet was brand new. Certainly the science wasn't old enough for there to be much, that had been published in peer-reviewed journals. And I wanted to know what is the good and what is the bad and what is transgenics. And I came to understand that transgenics was simply the crossing over of species barriers. This could be done at the level of just organisms. This could be done all the way up to the level of sentient beings, that you could literally blend one kind of a creature with another creature. Why would we want to do that? What would be the purpose behind it? That was what motivated me. And quickly I began to realize that both the military and also the pharmaceutical industry both had an interest in transgenics. The military because they thought they might be able to create exotic new forms of materials that could be used. For instance, one of the first successes was a project that was funded by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, in which they created transgenic goat spiders, actually spider goats. And the reason that they did this was because they knew that spider silk is amazingly resilient, lightweight, but very strong. And yet it's not very easy, to create a spider farm where you can milk spiders for their silk. But they knew that they could do this with goats. And so that one of the first successes in transgenics was creating a goat which was part spider. It could actually grow spider silk in its milk. And then they could use this for making lightweight bulletproof vests. They could use it for creating cargo nets. But since that time until now, as we may discover later on in this discussion, it has become far more sophisticated in terms of the military's interest and the amount of dollars that are flowing into research that grew out of those early forms of transgenic science. On the other side of transgenics, which is probably the biggest part of where the funding is coming from today, is in the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmaceuticals, why? Because the industry often has to labor with the FDA to try to get permission to do testing of new drug therapies on human subjects. It's very daunting, that task, to try to get a promising new remedy potentially for some kind of debilitating disease, and then to be able to take and start trying that medicine, which is unproven on human test subjects, is not easy to do. Well, the pharmaceutical industry saw right away that they would be able to take animals and put human DNA into the animals, create a human-animal chimera, and then they could work around this problem with getting permission from federal agencies to do human experimentation, and now they could test new drugs in human-animal chimeras to see how the human elements of that creature might respond in a way that they're hoping for with these drug therapies. That too has also grown a great deal since those original transgenic experiments, in that now, of course, what the public most usually hears about is human-animal chimeras that are being created for the purposes of developing stem cell lines, and then the stem cell lines can be used for testing new therapies in hopes that we're going to lead to cures for a variety of human diseases and ailments. Anyway, it was the discovery of transgenics. And my interest in why we would have an interest in funding research into crossing over species barriers that then led me to discover that behind these emerging fields of science was a new cultural movement called transhumanism. And transhumanists are made up today really of all walks of life, everything from college kids to old hippies to academics and professionals. It has become a cultural movement, and it's quickly growing. It's international. Today there's a Christian Transhumanist Association, there's a Buddhist Transhumanist Association, there's a Muslim Transhumanist, there's a Mormon Transhumanist, and then there's just a Transhumanist Association. And for whatever reason, I've had the privilege of somehow becoming connected with some of the leading figures in the world in this area. In fact, Dr. James Hughes, who was the president of the World Transhumanist Association, when he was still the head of the WTA, contacted me and asked if I would come on his syndicated radio show, which is called Change Surfer Radio. Dr. Hughes is a bioethicist. He teaches at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. He's a sociologist. He was and is really the man, the top shelf, if you will. So I agreed to do his show. And I went on his show, and not very well prepared either, but to debate the ethics of crossing over species barriers in ways that are completely unnatural. And why would we want to do that? Now, of course, as a Christian, and I would probably still consider myself a conservative Christian, I believe in a divine order. In other words, I believe that God was at the beginning of creation, and God, for whatever reasons, placed barriers between the species and ordered that each kind would only reproduce after its own kind. So in the back of my mind, of course, I want to know, what does God know that we don't know? Why did he do that? But then I would say that even if you didn't believe in divine creation, if you are an evolutionist, what we are doing now was not allowed for by evolution either. Natural selection has not done what we are now doing. And so for me, it was a cause for alarm that, they talk about throwing off the balance of nature. We were talking about doing it in ways that a former generation could not have even imagined. So today, the World Transhumanist Association had an original cause. It was really to bring international attention to the idea that through emerging fields of science, we would soon be able to alter what it means to be a human, literally rewrite our DNA, alter ourselves by altering our genetic makeup, create humans, Homo sapiens 2.0. The movement today is often called H+, which just simply means humans plus. A transhuman is in a transitionary state of being. They are human. They are wanting to transition into something else, but ultimately they want to become a post-human, something that has become so radically altered from what we are today as to no longer even be considered to be human. And they imagine creating Homo sapien 2.0 through the use of technology, from neuropharmacology to nanotechnology, genetic engineering, stem cell sciences, robotic assistance, brain-machine interfacing, all of the new fields of science that could have an application for human enhancement is important to the transhumanist movement. Now, the World Transhumanist Association had an original goal of bringing international attention to the movement, and there was a point at which they believed that they had succeeded at doing that. And so they dropped the World Transhumanist Association name and changed it to the IEET, the Institute for Ethics and Emerging Technology. Dr. Hughes is also now the CEO or the president of the IEET, and most of the most well-known names in the world that are also involved in transhumanism, such as Nick Bostrom of Oxford University, are chairs or members of the IEET. So somehow, I never set out to somehow become involved as the nemesis, if you will, of the transhumanist movement, and I've actually became friends with people like Dr. Hughes. He has since been on my radio show. We recently did a series where we were talking about the question, are we alone in the universe, which was raised by the Royal Academy of Scientists out of the UK. And we had him come on and he talked about, future space travel from a transhumanist point of view and how our bodies could be enhanced to make us more adaptable to zero gravity states and things like that. So, but the movement is very serious and it's being taken very serious in the world today, from academia to university studies, and you'll be surprised to find out the amount of revenue literally in the tens of millions to the billions of dollars that are flowing into this futuristic dream of transhumanism now and the adaptation of various fields of science, which will be used in the very near future to alter what it means to be a human. The science is being developed now according to the world's best and government experts. It's being tested in laboratory settings and is slowly being adapted so that it can be used as a tool for actually altering what it means to be a human. With regards to who would be funding, who has an interest, that's where it begins to become really surprising and it actually is not too difficult to verify even from secular but reputable news sources. For instance, if you were to go to Google today and type in transhumanism, you would find something like 250,000 web pages now around the world that are dedicated to both the study, philosophy, but this new world view called transhumanism. However, if you were to type in genetic engineering laboratories, you'd find more than 24 million websites in the world now dedicated to the subject of genetic engineering, which is, of course, one of the sciences that the transhumanists aspire to believe that this is going to be used to alter what it means to be a human. Now, on the ground, what does it mean? Here in the United States of America, you may remember where a few years ago, 2006, I believe, George W. Bush, in a State of the Union address, called for legislation to be enacted that would prohibit the creation of human-animal chimeras. And he wasn't just talking about embryos for experimentation, because he also talked about prohibiting the creation of exotic human life forms that could be patented. Why would the President of the United States, in a speech of record, be calling for legislation that would prohibit this technology? It's because it's emerging very quickly. And we know now that there are those rogue scientist wannabes, the Dr. Moreaus, who are already raising these to full maturity. And we can come to some of those admissions in this interview as well. For example, one of the first things that President Obama did at the executive level, as soon as he became president, he overturned restrictions that had been put in place by President Bush, which would have prohibited federal dollars, American taxpayer money, flowing in to pay for experiments to be done on human-animal chimeras and other forms of science such as stem cell sciences, which is also important to the transhumanist movement. But what most of the public doesn't realize, when we're talking about stem cell sciences, we're almost always talking about the creation of a human-animal chimera from which those stem cells are being derived. But now tax dollars in the United States from the federal level are flowing into thousands of laboratories. In the state that I live in Missouri, for instance, there is a farm that is raising transgenic pigs that are part human. They're using these pigs to actually grow organs in a test in the hopes that these humanized organs in the pigs can then be transplanted into people who are on donor waiting lists. Now, you know, years ago they called this xenotransplantation. And they had hoped to just implant entire pig organs inside humans, but the human bodies in the tests kept wanting to reject these pig organs. Now, though, with human DNA actually growing inside of a pig, we may be able to create an organ that can solve this problem of organ donation. But that kind of funding from the federal level now is flowing into states in a way that had been prohibited under the Bush administration. But it goes deeper. In 2006, a fantastic thing happened. The Department of Health, which is the largest department in the United States of America which funds research into health issues, provided $773,000 to Case Law School in Cleveland, Ohio, for one reason: to develop over a 24-month period the guidelines that will be used, according to their own press release at Case Law School, used for creating policy for human enhancement regarding the next step in human evolution. Max Melhelm, who is the law professor and a bioethicist at Case Law School, was given the responsibility of leading the team of 24 to 36 months field study, if you will, using actual test subjects. Human subjects, according to the original press release, would be used for devising how policy, government policy, can be extended to human non-humans. Well, because this started in 2006, and we knew that the target ending date for this study, which was being done not just by Max Melhelm, but law professors, bioethicists, genetic engineers, people who work in the fields of genetic alteration, that within 24 months to 36 months this field study would be done. 2009 was the target date for the report to be issued. So I waited with bated breath. In what way did Case Law School actually use human test subjects to provide what the government wants, guidelines to be used for human enhancement, to set the policy for how, for instance, will the Constitution, how will the Bill of Rights be extended to a human non-human? How much of a living entity has to be human before it can be protected under our laws? Must it be 90% human and 10% something else, 50% human? So I wanted to know. Well, the end of the test came and no public statements have been forthcoming. But what I noticed was that Professor Melhelm now, immediately at the end of the study, started traveling the United States giving lectures at universities. And he's giving 2 different lectures, and this is the title of his lectures. One is called Directed Evolution, Public Policy and Human Enhancement. And the second lecture he's given now is Transhumanism and the Future of Democracy. And you can go to the Arizona State University, and that second lecture is actually available as a podcast. You can download the lecture, unless they remove it from the time this film is made until the time somebody might go there to download it, but you can actually go and download it. So here you not only have the President of the United States loosing federal funds to go into research on human-animal chimeras, stem cell lines, various kinds of laboratory experiments on humans that could then be applied later on down the road through a transhumanist philosophy, the use of those technologies, but it's actually being funded through the U.S. Department of Health to actually set the policy and guidelines for how the law will be applied to human non-humans. It even goes deeper. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, has for over the last decade been funding, to the tune literally of billions of dollars, research into what they call the Extended Performance Warfighter. They have since removed the document, the original document on the Extended Performance Warfighter program from DARPA's own website, but a person can Google and find the same articles that were originally published being cached across the internet. The interesting parts about the Extended Performance Warfighter is that it even includes literally altering the DNA of soldiers. The public may more commonly hear this referred to as super soldier technology. But it got interesting this year. The 2011 budget for DARPA, which can be downloaded at Wired magazine if a person wants to go and read the DARPA budget, allows millions of dollars for what they are calling biodesign. Biodesign is actually outlined in the budget. The purpose of it has to do with immortalism. The purpose of it is to literally discover how cellular destruction occurs and why in regeneration of cellular decay, we as humans don't wind up at 100% again, and we begin to age. And DARPA has an interest in figuring out how to get around the decaying process of cellular life. And they use the term creating an immortal organism. But it's more than just an organism. They consider it to be potentially a lethal force that can be used in military application. Wired magazine actually referred to it as a living, breathing creature. And DARPA admits that the force of this living creature, this immortal organism, could be so potent that it ought to also have what they called a kill switch introduced into its organism, so that in case it gets out of hand, we could throw the switch and stop it, or if it became available to our enemies, we could throw the switch and stop it. So that in the United States, we know that from the federal level, under Obama, revenue is flowing into this research. We know that from the U.S. Department of Health, revenue is flowing into this research. From the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And if a person wants to do their homework, they'll find out that it's also the Air Force, the Navy, the Army. All of our military laboratories are funding now, to the tunes of millions and billions of dollars, research into fields that also include the altering of their soldiers for the purposes of having total battlefield domination in the future. But a person should also be aware that this technology is not just limited to the United States of America. In Australia, in China, in Great Britain, all around the world, literally tens of thousands of laboratories are receiving both federal and private funding for this kind of research. In the United States, even when Bush had called for restrictions on federal funding, it didn't stop the research here. It simply was being done through private grants and private dollars. There were no laws that were stopping people from doing human-animal research here. But now it starts to get really interesting in that even the scientific community is making admissions, which of course I was suspicious of anyway for some time. There was a Reuters article about 6 months ago called "Scientists Want Debate on Animals with Human Genes." And it turns out that the scientists that were being interviewed were the same scientists that 24 months ago were involved in what was called the human embryology discussions out of Great Britain. Laboratories wanted to receive federal funding, public money, to finance their investigations and experiments, which included altering humans and altering animals, at least at the embryonic stage. And there was such public outcry in Britain about it that the government decided to have a public forum, and they allowed different people, ethicists, bioethicists, even religious scholars, to weigh in on the question of whether or not it would be ethical to begin altering humans at, of course, in the beginning, the embryonic level, but later on perhaps to full maturity. At the end of those discussions, and there were some very interesting things during the discussions, by the way. For instance, the Vatican had 2 bishops present during these discussions, and the 2 bishops for the Vatican weighed in, saying that if a woman participated in these experiments by providing eggs or ovum, and then later if she had a conflict of conscience and decided that she wanted to raise this half human, half animal as her own child, that she ought to have the right to do so. And I believe that the Vatican's bishops were not really making that argument in sincerity as much as they were trying to illustrate the tortured ethics, the kind of unanswerable questions about, do they have a soul? In Israel, some of the religious scholars in Israel have weighed in, talking about if we create a transgenic animal or clone a transgenic animal and it is part cow, how much of it would need to be human before it would be protected under our laws, and or if the majority of it was cow, could we then offer it as a burnt sacrifice? So illustrating once again that there really isn't any way to wrap any kind of Judeo-Christian ethic around what we are now doing, but it hasn't stopped us from doing it. Well, those scientists who have been receiving funding now from the British government for the past 24 months are back. And the Reuters headline, "Scientists want public debate on animals with human genes," was very specific in that they want to know how far the public now would be willing to let them go. And there were 2 things in this Reuters article that were very telling. One, the scientists themselves admitting that among the scientists involved in this research, they are comfortable now with up to 50% human-animal integration. See, the public mostly is still under the impression that this is being done at the embryonic level and that the amount of human DNA in a transgenic animal is so minute as to be excusable. Well, what we learned in this article is it is up to at least 50% human-animal integration and that the scientists involved with it are comfortable. But where they want the debate to go now is, can we raise these to full maturity in the public's knowledge and experiment on part humans, part animals that are fully grown? And by admitting that that's now where they want the public to be comfortable with this research, they also said that they knew that there are some rogue scientists out there that are not operating with federal dollars, and they're getting ahead of them in this technology. And it could even become a new kind of a weapon of mass destruction. It could at a minimum become a molecular biological nightmare, because now by crossing over species barriers in ways that neither evolution nor God allowed for, we are completely uncertain about how, when this gets out of the box, where it may lead us. To answer the question, what would be the benefits of transhumanism through the eyes of a transhumanist? I can tell you, because some of them are my friends and I have had the opportunity to debate with them. And when I say friends, I don't mean that I share their worldview whatsoever, but we have, cordial conversations. It's diplomatic. And I believe in the sincerity, for instance, of men like Dr. James Hughes. Dr. Hughes would never advocate for anything, I think, that he believed would be detrimental to the future of society. So much of their ideas are altruistic in the sense that they're selfless and they're perceived to be for the good of society as a whole. For instance, longevity. One of the key objectives of transhumanism is to extend our lifespans. People who are either transhumanists or who are friendly to the transhuman vision, such as Aubrey de Grey, who is a member of the Methuselah Foundation, the whole commitment of which is to, either through diet or even more advanced applications such as genetic engineering, learn how to do things that will bring about the end of human suffering and disease and therefore lead to longer lifespans. Learn how, through genetic engineering, for instance, to perhaps turn off what is happening when tumorous cancers are growing in our bodies. So that not only do they intend to enjoy the benefits of longer life in the future as transhumans, Aubrey de Grey is saying now that if you're 50 years of age when you're watching this video, there's a very good chance you could live to be as much as 1,000 years old with how quickly this science and technology is advancing. But the transhumans don't just want to extend life, because, as you know, some people watching this might say, you know what, why would I even want to live to be 1,000 years old? I'm kind of ready to get out of here now, you know, with the way that the world is going. So the transhumanists also consider that, and it's not just a longer life, but it's a happier life. It's a healthier life where we're stronger and we've been enhanced cognitively. Through neurosciences now, we're learning things about the brain. We're learning the portion of the brain that leads to depression also leads to euphoria. And if we could learn how to control those portions of the brain, we may develop natural treatments for persons so that they could be happier, so that they could escape from depression. So that would be one of their ideas. Of course, enhancing our bodies so that we're stronger. The elimination of pain. You know, right now I go out and dig a hole, and within 1 hour, man, I'm ready for some cold tea and a place to throw up my feet. But these future enhanced bodies would be able to perform at levels that, you know, perhaps only 25-year-old weightlifters right now do it, and we would be talking about people who may be 150 years of age that can run for miles. Also, cognitive enhancement, so that we not only eradicate diseases such as Alzheimer's, but we actually are able to modify the brain in ways where it is enhanced to be able to think at teraflops faster than we can now, and also to be able to even interface with computer systems of the future, sort of like the Matrix, you know, plug in, download, and all of a sudden I know Kung Fu. So, and these are perceived to be true benefits to humanity. We have better lives and we're better off as a result. Now, they also have some very exotic ideas about future humans and why they would be happy in particular ways. For instance, among transhumans is a segment that's called post-genderism. Post-genderism actually has grown out of the feminist side of the transhumanist movement. And as you know, feminists have been at war with their gender identities and the roles that society places on them for some time. Some among the feminist movement also believe that it's a little bit unfair that, they get pregnant and they're the ones that have to carry the baby and lose the shape of their body and then travail and give birth, where the man can enjoy the benefits of sex, but he doesn't have to go through this whole 9-month gestation period. So in transhumanism, there are some very exotic ideas such as post-genderism, the idea that we will be able to develop androgynous beings, morphological beings, who will take the best of what it means to be a man and the best of what it means to be a woman and actually have a new form of life that is both man and woman, who can enjoy the benefits of things such as sex, which I mentioned a moment ago, but without the burden of having to become pregnant, having to carry a child for 9 months. And so if you look into some of their ideas, where do babies come from? Don't these future humans want to have genetic offspring? And they've developed ideas around how all this could be done within their science. You take genetic samples, and this isn't altogether cloning, but you take genetic samples from the contributors, man, woman A, and man, woman B, or future marriages may be made up of multiple numbers. Maybe there's 18 or 20 that have entered into what we would then think of as a marriage contract. And those ones that want genetic offspring can all provide samples of their genetics. And then this is taken to a specialized pregnancy center or birthing center of the future. And through some form of super in vitro fertilization, those genetic samples are placed inside of an egg which has had its nucleus removed, which is also probably donated from one of these men-women. It is treated with chemicals or with electricity like we do with cloning now. And it jumpstarts spindle formation, cells begin to divide, and a new man-woman made up of multiple partners begins to grow and becomes an embryo. And if that sounds incredible to you, in Britain just this week, the first baby from 3 parents was born. The science has already been perfected. We're already doing it. It's not as if this is as futuristic as it may sound. We're at the beginning of the gate now, but we've come through the door. The gate is open, and we're walking through it, and we're moving that direction. And they're imagining how this science could be used in ways that, in their mind, is beneficial to humanity. We no longer have the burden of gender roles. Now, what do psychologists say about a baby? How a baby is bonded to its mother while it's growing up inside of its mother's womb is almost mystical. It's metaphysical. We don't understand it. A baby is born and even already knows the tone of its mother's voice. Well, transhumanists have an answer for that too. Post-genderists believe that they also take genetic samples from whichever of the men and women want to play the role of the traditional mother, and they grow a synthetic womb inside the birthing center, and it is hooked to an androidal system that also has the sound of the mother's voice recorded in it. And this androidal system can stand up, sit down, move around, make natural movements that feels very natural to the embryo that is growing up inside of it, so that by the time 9 months later, and even that is a question because these future humans may not take 9 months to gestate, but if they do, you go to the birthing center and the switch is thrown, the little baby is born, it's grown up inside its mother's womb because it was taken from her genetics and recreated in a laboratory. It has grown up listening to the sound of her voice and her heartbeat, all of which are a part of this future system. Did you know that some of the early discussions actually were around creating clones who would then be anesthetized, not even aware that they're alive, and their wombs would be used for gestating these children, and then afterward the clone, if not legally defined as a human, could be discarded. It would simply be a system for saving man, woman A from the burden of having to carry a child. But many of the, even within the transhumanist, philosophical community, simply couldn't tolerate that idea, and so they advanced it to growing a synthetic womb which could then be used for the gestation period. One of the other benefits that transhumanists imagine actually borderlines on the supernatural. And this started really with Nick Bostrom, who is a leading transhumanist in the world, sits on the IET's board under Dr. James Hughes. Nick Bostrom actually earned his prestigious seat at Oxford University by writing his thesis on transhumanist values. And thankfully for the rest of us, Dr. Bostrom has been kind enough to post his theses and other works that he has done. So anybody who would want to follow up on this could go to nickbostrom.com, pull down the website on the left side and click on Transhumanist Values and go and read his original theses, which he wrote to earn his PhD and his seat at Oxford University. It's interesting because Bostrom doesn't claim any kind of religious ideology, but he has diagrams in there that he uses when he gives his lectures at universities and also at the Transvision conferences, which are taking place every year now for about the past decade at leading law schools and universities around the world, in which the arguments are being detailed now, worked out among law scholars on how the laws and policy of our government will be extended to protect transhumans of the future and future democracy. But if you click on it and you look at some of the charts that he has created, for instance, he has one that's kind of a large rectangle. And in this rectangle, he describes this rectangle as representing all possible modes of perception, modalities, sensory modalities. Down in the corner, he draws a small circle, and he says this circle represents humans. The limits of our perception, modes of perception or sensory modalities, our eyesight, hearing, taste, feeling, and how far it extends into all possible modes of perception. Then around that, he draws a larger circle, and he says this is the animal kingdom. The animal kingdom not only has our level of perception, but other levels of perception. For instance, they can hear at higher decibels than we can. Dogs at 40,000 hertz, dolphins at something like 80,000 hertz. Some animals like bats can navigate using sonar. They also seem to be in touch with the earth somehow in ways that we're not. They can pick up vibrations. They'll begin to move out of particular areas when they know there's going to be an earthquake or there's going to be a volcano, and they'll begin to migrate to another area. And we're not exactly sure how they do that. They may be able to smell tumors. And if it's not smelling it, it's some other method by which sometimes they are aware that there is a tumorous cancer, something that is actually degrading your DNA. So he talks about these fascinating things, but then he says something that I think is of the most importance and borderlines the metaphysical. And that is when he points out that animals can also see into areas of the light spectrum that we cannot see into. And that is viewed in transhumanism as a future benefit, and even one of the causal reasons we would want to merge ourselves with the animal kingdom so that we can open these new modes of perception into realities that right now we are blinded to. Perhaps one of the reasons we would want to merge ourselves with animals so that we too would be able to do this. Why this is interesting to me as a Christian and as a researcher and as a scholar of biblical texts is because we know that animals can see into, at least some animals can see into, what we think of as the supernatural realm. And it isn't just extra biblical texts that seem to imply this, but even in the Bible. For instance, the story of Balaam's donkey. Balaam gets in trouble because he's prophesying against Israel, which he's been ordered, by God not to do. And so now he's on his donkey and he's going down the road. Well, the donkey can see something that Balaam cannot see. There's a large angel standing in the middle of the road with its sword drawn, and it's going to take off dumb Balaam's head. And Balaam doesn't know why the donkey keeps turning out of the way, and so he keeps kicking him to get him back on the road, and the donkey's trying to save his life. A great deal of extra biblical research has also been done that seems to show that animals sometimes are responding to something that we can't see. And in fact, probably the average person, at least at one time in their life, saw their dog growling at something that isn't there as far as we can tell, or maybe even behaving in a way. You have a dog that's vicious, it's brave, it's not afraid of anything, and then all of a sudden a strange feeling comes over you and the dog senses it too, or the dog may even run and hide under the bed. So they seem to be reacting to something that we can't see with our eyes. And in the traditions and in the histories of the world, owls come, and owls serve with the goddess Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft. Other areas of witchcraft where cats are used as mediums through which we are communicating with the spirit world. That idea has been with humanity since forever, but what made it real to me, of course, is the depiction out of the Bible, at least in one illustration, where an animal can see something the humans cannot see. That is definitely in the back of the mind of many of these transhumanists. And they are bravely wanting to go where no modern man has gone before, in breaching that barrier that is between us and them. This is so true that now the Templeton Foundation, which has been funding an entire series of lectures over the last several years at the Arizona State University on transhumanism and the future of democracy, have played off of what Dr. Bostrom began talking about, and many of what the university students are now asking about. How do we separate our humanity? If we change ourselves physiologically, we enhance ourselves to humans 2.0, do we also change our soul? Do we change our spirit? Do we even have a spirit anymore? And as these questions are being entertained, Arizona State University began a brand new project. You can go to ASU's website and you can click on it. It's called the Sophia Project, the goddess of wisdom. The Sophia Project, some believe even to be that feminine aspect of God, right? And it describes exactly what the Sophia Project is about. It is to verify and or to make contact with, and then they describe it, the ghosts of dead humans, aliens, angels, demons, a universal conscious, God. They list all of it, the whole purpose behind the project, growing out of transhumanist conversations and debates and lectures being offered at the Arizona State University and funded by the Templeton Foundation. Want to take this whole question of altering ourselves as humans forward to this next giant question. By doing so, can we also now cross over? Can we start communicating with that unseen intelligence? So this too is viewed as a value among transhumans. Many of them are spiritual, and many of them see that as a benefit. Well, some of these exotic ideas in transhumanism, of course, where it may be being viewed by them as a benefit, may cause a lot of red flags to go up among other people who also are interested in things supernatural. There are some of the critics, of course, of transhumanism who believe that their worldview is a bit too positive, you know, that they view this as being a utopian plan that's going to take us into the future. We're all going to live in a happy universe and have enhanced lives. But there are those who are also qualified to make criticisms based on the science itself and what it may portend to do. For instance, Dr. Leon Kass was the chairman of the President's Council on Bioethics during the Bush administration. And here is a man who had the full review of the science, the best reports on the science, testimony from experts who were working in these fields of science and what they believed could actually develop out of transforming mankind. And after Dr. Kass had served on that seat with the government, he resigned, he wrote a book, and in the introduction to his book, Life, Liberty, and the Defense of Dignity, he wrote how that in laboratories around the world, scientists are now honing their skills, polishing their skills, looking forward to a post-human future, and that humanity is on the operating table, literally, scheduled for wholesale psychic and physiological redesign, while on the streets, the evangelists, he refers to them as, not transhumans, the evangelists are quietly selling their message, and that we are in a war for the mind of a generation And Dr. Cass believes we're probably going to lose this war, but he says that anybody who cares about their humanity, the time is now for standing up and understanding where science is taking us and what it may portend for the future. He's not the only one. Professor Francis Fukuyama reviewed emerging fields of science and then the philosophy of transhumanism. And he wrote a white paper on it in which he considered the combination of those two to probably be the most dangerous science and technological and philosophical concepts in the history of mankind, which he believes could very quickly lead to an extinction level event. The Birkbeck Law School in Britain is one of the most famous law schools on earth for teaching CSI students, crime scene investigators. And they put out a press release about 18 months ago now in which they said that they will need to design future classes for crime scene analysis which has been perpetrated by something that is only part human. Their whole point was that everything we know about forensics, about profiling, might not apply if we're trying to track down a serial rapist who is part wolf, because he may have a bloodlust, he may have a difference, his mindset, his instincts, everything about him may not fit anything that we understand. And this is considered to be such a real possibility, by the way. It isn't just the Birkbeck Law School. This last year in California, a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing in the state of California that was chaired by Democrat Brad Sherman, who's actually best known for his expertise in the spread of nuclear arms among terrorists, chaired this meeting. A writer for Congressional Quarterly, Mark Stenzel, attended the meeting and came out of it flabbergasted, because what the meeting was all about is future terrorism conducted by transhumans. And he said that the entire hearing, a congressional hearing, he said sounded more like a pitch for a sci-fi movie than it did a sober discussion of scientific reality, because he said they were talking about superhumans, super intelligence, artificial intelligence, and super animals that could soon be on the battlefield or even in our neighborhoods for domestic reasons, a lethal force for which we are not prepared. The government is so concerned about where transhumanism may take us in this regard that they consider this now to be the fledgling start of a new arms race. In the way that in the past between the Soviet Union and the United States we were in an arms race over nuclear arms, transhumanism is the near future arms race, and it is considered to be of such importance that the top scientific mind at the Pentagon, the Jasons, J-A-S-O-N, that's the name of the top scientific minds at the Pentagon, put out a press release recently called Jasons Fear Brain-Modified Foes, in which they were talking about this technology in the hands of our enemies. And what they were saying was, we have to get at the forefront of this technology. See, this is how we're going to be forced into this. It's not a matter of whether we should or whether it's ethical. We have to do it, because if we don't, our enemies will, and then they're going to subjugate us to their will. And therefore, because of that, that's why DARPA and other branches of the U.S. military, and of course, SAPOC budgets, black budgets, things we don't know anything about. There are literally billions of dollars flowing now beyond congressional review into the development of super soldier technology and other forms of exotic technology as a result of even what the Jasons are talking about. So there is this other side of this transhuman utopianism that is very concerning to a lot of great minds. And I can tell you that even on the ground now, already, the parts that are already being played out are raising alarm bells. For instance, the related science of genetically modified foods. We are already finding out that by unnaturally crossing over species barriers and creating potatoes that have moth genes in them and other variations of foods, that these foods do things. They have unintended consequences. Tests that are being done now in Britain where they're raising fields of genetically modified crops, and downwind the populations are developing respiratory diseases that are unusual, that are starting to skyrocket. There have been suppressed scientific studies. Arpad Pusztai is one famous case. His studies were supported by another independent scientist by the name of Irina Ermakova, who was able to repeat what he did. What did he find? He took rats and he forced these rats to eat genetically modified foods. They began developing tumorous cancers. Their offspring came in at half weight and died at half life. This was all done in a laboratory setting which was immediately being suppressed by a giant corporation whose name I won't mention, but who literally stands to lose trillions of dollars in the future, and therefore they are highly motivated to suppress these findings. And only because of Greenpeace and some others who have been involved in lawsuits for over a decade to force these documents to be made available to the public are we just now being made aware of some of the things that are happening in the real world. One of the test studies showed that they would put rats in a cage and starve them. And then they would place genetically modified potatoes here and natural organic potatoes here. And when they open the cage doors, the rats will run to the organic product and they won't even eat the genetically modified crop unless they're starving and have no other options, and then they'll eat it. And you gotta wonder what God's little creatures know about these products that we don't know. But we very well could be opening a door to a molecular biological nightmare, to a crossover between humans and animals, or genetic foods that probably not for a decade will we really understand what the impact on our health is going to be with some of this genetic modification. But imagine now, extrapolate what we already are finding about genetically modified crops. And there are many other stories, by the way, that are now coming through into the news that show that genetically modified crops are leading to cancers in humans as well. But where are genetically modified crops? They're everywhere. They're in Kellogg's Corn Flakes. Genetically modified soy is in food products in every store in the United States of America. This bear has already come through the door and there's no putting it back. So now we're riding the bicycle while we build it. The human population is the guinea pig. We're already doing the science and we'll wait and see how it turns out in the future. But imagine when we now take that same approach to living sentient beings. And now we have genetically modified animals and genetically modified humans that are in the environment, and they are crossbreeding and interbreeding one with each other. Very quickly we could have a human form of mad cow disease. If you're sitting in a restaurant eating goat cheese that contains human DNA, we don't know what the impact of that is going to be on a human. We certainly know what it did to cows and the kinds of brain diseases that it created in them when they were eating their own DNA, when they were eating product. We just simply don't know. Prion contamination. Wired magazine recently wrote a special article called Farm Animals, P-H-A-R-M, Farm Animals Crank Out Drugs. And the article was a positive spin on developing pharmaceuticals in transgenic animals. What the public doesn't know is that the writer for Wired Magazine contacted me first and wanted me to be part of that special series at Wired Magazine because they had come across an article that I had written at WorldNet Daily, which was raising some cautions about, tinkering with God's plan. So the writer, Elizabeth Svoboda, contacted me. I like what you have to say. I want my article to be balanced for Wired Magazine. Would you be willing to send me some issues, nutshell some issues that you believe should be, the cautionary side of this science? So I did. I sent it to Elizabeth Svoboda. About 3 weeks later, when the article was published by Wired Magazine, nothing I had said made it into the article. It was all positive about farm animals, P-H-A-R-M. So I emailed Elizabeth and I said, well, I guess nothing I said got written into the article. She said, no, everything you said was in the article, and it got censored out by the editors at Wired Magazine because they didn't want the public to be bothered by these issues. They wanted to put a positive spin on it. Well, then I went back and read the article, and I knew she was telling me the truth because there was a particular line that I had used in which I said we might want to be careful tinkering with God's plan. That's a very specific phrase. When I went back and read the article, I saw where a scientist by the name of Vandelevor said, now some people might say we shouldn't be tinkering with God's plan, but, she said, if we find a cure for cancer through a transgenic animal, we won't hear the public saying you shouldn't be doing that. I didn't do it, but I wanted to email Miss Vandelevore and say, have you watched the movie with Will Smith, I Am Legend? Because that is exactly the scenario with which that film opens. You have a molecular biologist or a geneticist sitting in front of a television on somebody's talk show saying, we have found the cure for cancer. How did they find the cure? They merged human and animal DNA because some animals are more resilient to cancer. And out of that, they created a vaccine. And they vaccinated all of the earth, and everybody celebrated that we have found the cure to cancer. Now the scene changes, and it's 2 or 3 years down the road, and almost all life on earth is dead. Why? The unintended consequence, a form of human rabies developed because something that was not natural to us now was bridged into our physiology by crossing over into the animal kingdom. And by the way, that is a very real scientific possibility, but it isn't stopping anybody. We're doing it anyway. So there definitely is two sides to this coin in terms of what transhumanists are aspiring to through the use of these new sciences: biotechnology, nanotechnology, neuropharmacology. They all have great ology names and ism names. But what they may do is lead us literally into the fulfillment of biblical prophecy.
And in conclusion tonight on InfoWars Nightly News, we're going to be interviewing Professor Tex Marrs. And of course, he was a University of Texas professor of space and aeronautics. He was an Air Force officer. He's one of the most read and best-selling authors in nonfiction on the science of robots. He's been a futurist. He's also a pastor. And he's written more than 40 books, including military textbooks. He's sold more than 20 million books total, and he joins us here in studio to get into the greatest threat to humanity, the singularity, the entire technocracy. And so Tex Marrs joins us here live on this Thursday edition of InfoWars Nightly News. The website is powerofprophecy.com. And he's got a new book coming out. You know, I was thinking about Tex a few weeks ago and meaning to call him, and then he called me. And I said, hey, I want you to come in and cover whatever you want to talk about. So he showed up today with a bunch of slides we're going to be showing you from his upcoming book that isn't out for a few months that gets into the, I guess, the final revolution, you could call it, or at least the Illuminati thinks that. And so it's going to be a history lesson to understand what makes the establishment tick. I haven't read the new book yet because it's not even been printed. I just spent 10 minutes looking at some of the slides and notes. It looks like it's pretty important information. And so I'm very, very excited to have fellow Austinite, fellow Texan, fellow American Tex Marrs here in our studios, and his lovely wife, Wanda. Tex, great to have you here, my friend.
Alex, great to be with you. It really is.
But good to see you. So, wow, it's been a long time since I had you on the air. I appreciate you coming in. You've got your own radio show, of course. I should have added. It's so hard to go over such a lengthy bio. Where should we start here, Tex, on this giant subject that you're going to give the viewers out there the very first look at?
Well, I think we really need to look at three elements of the Illuminati. If we want to study the history of the Illuminati, of the elite, let's just call them, I think there are three great elements. The first one is the French Revolution. Yeah, people say, well, why go back that far? Because it really set up everything for today. Then 100 years later, we had the communist explosion, the communist revolution in the Soviet Union. And that set up for what we have today, which really is the high-tech explosion. People say, well, what do you mean? What's wrong with high-tech? What's wrong with the computers, digital things, software, robotics? There's nothing wrong with them exactly, but they are setting up a police state all around us. You know, it's not something that we're going to see outside of us. We are stuck inside of it. We're like in a box right now. We're in a vice. And in every case, there's a high-tech revolution going on. And the elite are spending billions of dollars to put us in this vice. We need to know what's going on, what's happening for the future. The next 10 or 20 years, if we stay around that long. But there are things that are happening that people really need to understand. And I want to give you credit for being the first on these issues. You know, I was telling you that I was at a newsstand, actually at the supermarket, and there was your first issue. I didn't know you were going to put out a magazine. There was your first issue of InfoWars magazine. I said, hey, Wanda, look at this. And there on the cover was, well, it was about robotics, about how the military was using drones and other robots. Inside was a great article. I want to give people a quote from you about that, because at that very moment, I was working on my new book, Robot Alchemy. And I said, wow, this fits perfectly.
In fact, we'll show folks a document Ken shot, a first look at the cover of one of the big coffee table-sized books that you've put out so many bestsellers of, like Codex Magica, Robot Alchemy. Please continue.
Well, you know, if we look at these three great revolutions, you know, Mikhail Gorbachev said everything in Russia, you know, from 1917 on, came from the French Revolution. But what do you have in the French Revolution?
Illuminati Jacobins.
Yeah, exactly. The Illuminati Jacobins, that's right. You have Lord Rothschild and his beginnings at that time. You have the terror that began, the guillotine.
That's how they got most of the big palaces in France and still own the Rothschild wine. Literally just stolen. I mean, amazing. And you know, of course, you mentioned technology. I want to go back and take your time, Tex. We got an hour, and I'm going to let you roll here and only interrupt half as much. But just to back up what you're saying here, it's not. People say, "Well, you're a troglodyte. You're anti-technology." No, you wrote the first big bestseller on robotics. You've written technology books, and you know the literal what is the best-selling textbook on military armed service courses. I mean, such an incredible bio. You're a pro-technology guy. It's that they're building Trojan horses into it all to spy, to control. They're taking it and twisting it, and I guess that's why you call it alchemy. So we'll get back into that. But yeah,
it's magic. It's witchcraft, basically.
So take your time. Start at Weishaupt, the French Revolution. For people that don't know, right before we went live here, started taping to air it on the show, you said, you know, it's funny, there's a photo or a painting of Adam Weishaupt, of the founder of the Illuminati. People think that's just a rumor. And I'm glad you said that, because people think it's in movies. They don't know it's Encyclopedia Britannica. That's right. They don't know it's actual real history. So take your time. You've got the floor. Start at the beginning.
Well, at the same time America was having all of its ferment of our American Revolution, thank God we had people, we had Thomas Jefferson and others who were not of a dictatorial mind. So our revolution went a different direction than the Francis did. But the Frenchmen really had a problem. First of all, they had this king and queen. They needed to overthrow, you know, King Louis and Marie Antoinette. And they did. They stormed the Bastille. Who did this? What got them so aroused? We had an amazing conspiracy. That's exactly what it was. We had Adam Weishaupt, who founded the Order of the Illuminati in 1776. Then we had, of course, Rothschild, who funded the whole shebang. But it was the first great revolution. They said, we're going to promote democracy, equality.
And by the way, they got the records of it. That's how we know all this. Oh, yeah. When the writer got struck down with all the command orders. This is.
Oh, yeah. I have a copy, in fact, one of only 10 in the world.
Wow.
Of the first book by Adam Weishaupt, when he set it all out, exactly what he intended to do. Adam Weishaupt was a professor.
I wish you would have brought that. We got to have you back.
Well, maybe I will. But he was a genius of a man, but he was called a devil man. He was a Jesuit. He was a Jewish man. He was a Mason.
He was everything.
He was everything. And he founded the Order of the Illuminati, which you can read about. Now, he founded this, and the idea spread throughout Europe, but especially in France. You know, a lot of people say, well, they just killed the nobility. They set up the guillotine. All they wanted was to kill the nobility.
They replaced one evil with one even 10 times worse. But go through it.
Absolutely. Christianity was the great threat.
Tell us the Illuminati goal. Well, I mean, it's pull down everything. Tell them.
Well, the Illuminati goal is just as you have stated on your program over and over and over again. Basically, they want to kill us. Listen.
You tell them out there, Tex.
Alex, well, you know, the problem is that there are too many of us. And they want to rule. How do they rule with 7 billion people on this planet? The way they do it is to kill about 6.5 billion. That sounds so fantastic. And how are they going to do this? They have devised, we're going to take you through 3 revolutions, basically. The French Revolution, which is the setup for the whole thing, the communist explosion of the revolution, which happened in the 20th century, and now that we're in the 21st century, 2013, now we have the high-tech revolution. It seems to be good, Alex. I mean, they've got everything for us. I was just reading an article here about drones.
Anything you want to show, put them around here. We'll show people.
Yeah. Did you know that they're going to have 75 to 80,000 jobs? I mean, this is a good thing.
They're engineering the economy where the only jobs are in the tyranny. That's how you engineer it.
Exactly.
The majority of the new, in the last, since 9/11, that staged event, of course you know this, but for viewers who may not, the majority of scholarships in technology aren't engineering for computers or whatever. It's for the surveillance grid. So they're designing it where that's the only choice you've got. Sorry.
Well, there are many billions of dollars being spent for this by DARPA. And drones is only a small part of it. They're developing intelligent robots, for example. And people say, well, you know, robots, they're clunky, metallic things. You know, I've seen all the movies, all the science fiction, and you'll see all of these in my book, Robot Alchemy. You know, remember Anne Francis and the robot Robbie?
Yes.
And Forbidden Planet?
Danger.
Yeah, exactly. Then we had Gort. In the day the Earth stood still, 1951. He was, you know, after Patricia Neal and all of those things. We had good robots, we had bad robots. We had the Star Wars robots, but then we had the Blade Runner guys. He came out and killed his own creator.
The replicant.
Exactly. Well, in about 20 years from now, people listening to me understand this. In about 20 years from now, we're going to reach singularity. What does singularity mean? The roboticists say, we're talking about the doctors and so forth, and various professors at the universities, they say that in about 20 to 25 years, we're going to reach singularity. That means that robots, that their artificial intelligence has been gaining on the humans. We laugh at the robots now. You know, we laugh.
Well, Big Blue beat a human, what was it, 10 years ago?
Yeah, well, that's right.
Or Deep Blue.
But now we have robots that don't look like robots. We have, for example, the Eater robot. The Eater robot, what does it do? Well, it's a military robot, but it literally survives by eating human beings.
That's right.
They can grind up human beings, take the bodies on the battlefield, and feed them into Eater. It goes by biomass. That's how it runs itself. This is an example. I want to show people some of the robots that the military is now creating. Now, we know about the drones. They're not a few hundred, not even a few thousand. They're going to be hundreds of thousands of drones everywhere.
The Pentagon already has something like 30,000 Predators alone.
Yeah, and the thing is, they're not like you think. You know, you think you're going to see this big thing in the sky and you'll be able to avoid it or whatever. No, they come, some of them are like flies. And, you know, you're being, you know, bothered by this little
And it
fly.
injects you with a bioweapon.
Absolutely. You'll see the picture that we've got here where you see the robotic fly has a small injector, and he can inject you. So you're sitting on your back porch reading a magazine or whatever, and suddenly you're dead. People want to know why. They don't understand. But
the Air Force came out a few weeks ago with this new film showing the drone flies over and drops hundreds of little ones that land by your house and spy on you. But that's the high-tech ones.
Yeah.
Those are ones that can move. They already have the smart meter on the side of your house, dialing into all your wireless, spying on you. And the White House White House CIA director came out, you know, a few months ago, Petraeus, before he got disgraced, and said, we're spying on you via your washing machine. Remember that? Yeah,
he did. You know, and the refrigerator is spying on you.
You know, I stole your thunder. You were going to quote what you saw in the magazine. The End of Humanity.
Well, your magazine had this article, and I believe the article that you wrote was called Rise of the Robots, the End of Humanity.
Yes.
That sounded like science fiction, but I knew that it wasn't. I read the article. It was amazing. I want to quote you, one of the things you said in that article. You said this, Alex. You said, in the coming decades, humanity will face a new kind of enslavement, a scientifically designed tyranny through which the elite will use robots to subjugate the rest of humanity and eliminate any pockets of non-cooperative resistance. That's from your article, October 2012. I thought about that a long time. I was working on this book. I was working on these kinds of robots that we're going to see. Now, robots are an amazing thing. Frankly, you know, I love robots. I wrote the 3 cardinal books on them. I was the first to write the personal robot book, 1985. It was selected by the Electronic Book Club, the Computer Book Club. I wrote the Great Robot book. I even wrote a book on careers with robots.
You are a leading futurist.
Yeah, well,
or were in a previous incarnation.
Absolutely, in a previous incarnation, exactly. Well, you know, I've had a hiatus here of about 25 years, but I kept, you know, that interest in robotics and in computers and all those things on the side. And I've been watching how things have been developing. You remember that Dwight Eisenhower, as president, in his farewell address, he warned of the military-industrial complex.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what is the military-industrial complex? It's exactly what we're up against now. Now,
well, warn them, Tex. I mean, because I want you to take over the show. Tell people out there. You present. Tell them what's happening.
Well, first of all, what you have to understand is robots are incredible creatures. Right now, they're putting artificial intelligence in robots that is amazing. Now, they can't do everything that, you know, we would like them to do. I mean, a man has written a book, a very intelligent book, by the way, Levi, has written a book about sex with robots. They're going to be driverless cars. They're going to be your kitchen helpers. You're going to come home at the end of the day, and they're going to just wait on you.
Google cars are already like in 8 states.
Yeah, well, yes, and, you know, in every way we're being watched, surveyed. But now back to the robots. If you have these robots, the question is, what happens when the robots can outthink, outsmart, outdo human beings? You say, well, that won't ever happen. Oh, yes, it will happen. All the robots.
Well, it's game over. They already say they're not going to have a military. It's all going to be robots, ground, sea, and air, submarines, tiny ones, that will totally control us. And we're paying to build it now, and the elite program it. So even if the troops say no to killing people, the robots are going to say yes. And they say, like Bill Joy, as you know, in Wired Magazine said 12 years ago, he said that we're just going to kill everybody. And they publish this stuff telling us, and it's, you know, then people think it's funny.
Yeah, you mentioned Bill Joy in Wired Magazine there. He was the head of Sun Macro Computers, a major computer server company. Well, a guy like that, a billionaire, says, you know, I didn't give enough thought to computers, to robotic instruments. I didn't think about intelligent machines, where they would go. But he says, basically, well, let's just look at what he said. He said, they don't need you. They don't need you. It's like the Stepford Wives. Once they've got the robotic creatures built, they don't need the wives. They're going to kill them and get rid of them. That's the point. They don't need all these. They don't need these workers.
There's no empathy. There's no ancestors. There's no soul. They are a perfect puppet to be. That's why our cover is this fake human with an Illuminati pyramid jacked into it. This is the devil trying to play God.
Absolutely.
But I keep going, and then I want to bring up the genetic side, because there's 2 arms. They see the right arm of their takeover, that they will achieve immortality, in the words of Ray Kurzweil and others, other high priest, via the merger with the cybernetic interface. But separately, they're also looking for the immortal cell lines.
That's right. Absolutely.
And which they actually talk about injecting themselves, but first testing on us, a zombie system where you're still alive, but you are undead. Your cells just keep dividing forever, but in some type of ordered system to where you are living dead. And that's not TV movies. This is what they're into.
Well, we're operating on 2 wavelengths here. On one, you have transhumanism, where humans become cyborgs. Okay, they take on the parts. They get a biochip in their brain. It all sounds so great. You can have an encyclopedia in your mind instantly, okay, just by installation.
But it's going to have a back door.
Well, not just a back door. I think it's going to have a front door. You know, whatever they want you to do, you will do.
And you'll dial out of the real world more and more into their false projections.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I see it this way. Imagine a biochip in your brain. and you've got all this great knowledge.
And they're going to make it so horrible, the world's going to be so hellish, we're going to want to go into the Matrix.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry, and the Great Deceiver runs that, and the beast will be seen everywhere as a talking image. I mean, the Bible's all coming true. I'm sorry.
No, well, you're right. That's Revelation 13, the image of the beast. He'll walk, he'll talk.
Worldwide.
You know,
he will fill it, and it will serve him worldwide.
That's right.
His spirit will be in it. It's a robot.
Yeah. Bill Clinton, gave a speech in Ireland a few years ago, and he said, do you know what? Now, this is very prescient of good old Bill there. But President Clinton said, do you know what? He asked the audience. He said, we've reached the point now where there can be virtual reality everything. There can even be a virtual reality president. You think you're looking at the real man, but you're not. It's a virtual reality president. He signs documents. He goes to various public functions, cuts ribbons and all that. But it's a virtual reality president. That's what he says. We're at that stage now.
And that's why they're wrapping everything in the TVs, the glitz, the false reality to force you into it.
Yes, you see, everyone will want to have a chip put in them. Everyone will want to be superhuman. This is the transhuman. This is the promise.
Well, of course, they say... Well, of course, you see your notes. I mean, you're the expert in the book, but talk about how they plan to force us, because Kurzweil says you'll be like a bug. You'll got to have this just to even be on the same plane as us. So they always sell this takeover as the trendiness or to live longer.
Oh, yes. Well, they're going to get to the point where they say we can download you into a robot. We can make you live forever. You can be immortal. Now, again, we're probably 30 to 40 years from that. But we're going to have far less than that immediately in the next 10 to 15 years. Now, let's just...
People are already living, most of them, in these fantasy video games.
Absolutely.
And that's what drones are. Human intelligence is in it controlling it.
Yeah, there's games where you sit in your living room and you send out your avatar into the world. He goes to Paris, he goes to Rome. You're sitting at home, you're a couch potato, you're doing nothing, but your avatar is going out into the world for you, all right? But here's the problem. Once they have everybody on all these chips, you mentioned the backdoor situation, then comes the hideous truth. They can make you do whatever they want. There's no requirement. You will willingly do it. Your brain will tell you to do it. Now, if you somehow rebel, if you're one of those, somehow the chip doesn't work.
Here comes the drone.
Here comes the drone, yeah. But even beyond that, imagine a horror machine. You're sitting in your living room, and somehow they give you the image that you're being waterboarded.
No, that's it. It's a pain induction chamber.
It is. And it's not just once or twice, but they will waterboard you forever and ever.
They will put you into artificial hell.
It could be an artificial hell until you subscribe to their doctrines, their beliefs.
And by the way, they say they're going to do all that. That's what's incredible. They write their own demonic poetry, and come out and admit they're torturing even children in front of their parents because they're the bad guys, and now they flip it. Just digressing for a moment, I'm sure you've seen they've now fully flipped from Al-Qaeda's the threat to Al-Qaeda's our friend. And Karzai says the U.S. runs Al-Qaeda, but that's the globalist. And then they say the new Al-Qaeda, I have the L.A. Times, is Christian white patriots. And they said our belligerents, this is the L.A. Times, they say, these are quotes, our belligerents will be crushed, and that they're sending the federal task forces. I mean, these are like weird little Che Guevara, Joseph Stalin wannabes, because I see it bragging how they're going to get us. I mean, this is, and these aren't people that think of their life as being somebody from what they create or who they know. They get that through the state machine they're going to be given power. It's the same spirit, and these transhumanists, not the low-level fools, but the real ones, they are into the power that they're going to be controlling the master grid.
Absolutely.
I mean, just look at this right here. It says they are increasingly frightening numbers of cells of angry men in the United States preparing for combat. We can give a document cam. With the U.S. government. They are unusually heavily armed, blinded by an incredible hatred, often motivated by religious zeal, and it's got the Southern Poverty Law Center report. Christians, they are not jihadists. They are white, right-wing Americans, nearly all of which have obsessive attachment to guns. No, we know when they come for that. That's the canary in the coal mine. Who may represent a greater danger to the lives of American civilians than international terrorists. And then it goes on to say that, you know, we need to have the federal government and the task force, which they've already got going, it's now flipping it, deal with these domestic groups because they are a bigger threat than foreign terrorists. That's at the end. And it goes on. It says, how can we reverse? What could be done to reverse this tide of belligerent ignorance? And it says, federal task forces.
Federal task forces.
So
yeah.
I mean, this is literal. We knew this was going on behind the scenes. Nothing about Al-Qaeda.
Right.
Christians, gun owners, libertarians, returning veterans who've gone and done their dirty work. We're done with you. Robots are here now. In fact, I've talked to Marines. I've talked to a Marine Corps colonel.
Exactly it.
Who told me at Urban Warrior 13 years ago in Oakland, he said, listen, he goes, you think that robot, they had a Humvee drive in with a 50 cal, it targets off sound and movement. There's no humans. You know, there's humans driving it from a satellite wherever they want. They had guys that are doing it by hand, and that then takes out practicing, you know, the American people. And I know I'm ranting here.
No, you're not.
But he said, listen, Alex, he goes, I know what you do. He goes, you have no idea. This is when our cameras are off and everything's happening. And he goes, there's stuff I can't tell you about. He goes, it's right out of Terminator. And he said, there's stuff for PSYOPs, you name it. And I said, well, like, what is it? And he just said, well, this is about, you know, 20, 30 years behind what you're seeing here. And, of course, now all that's coming out.
It is.
But the issue is, I then talked to some other people in the military, and for PSYOPs, they have the eaters that eat the flesh and things and then biomechanically feed themselves. They have them just like out of the movie Terminator, except they're on wheels, but they have like skull heads and things just to terrorize people because they've done tests with those in simulations on the bases with role players that sign national security, like actors and people. And now they're doing drills. And this, I was told this before it came out in the news, where the troops were saying, why are we practicing mowing down people in football jerseys, Dallas Cowboy jerseys, and John Deere hats? Because it was all white, like 90% white guys wearing John Deere hats, farmers, grandpa. Some other military people I was talking to were telling me, I don't know, a few years ago now, time flies, maybe 3 years ago, that we're having all these drills where we practice mowing down people that look like mainline U.S. citizens, and mainly white, kind of good old boys, like ranchers and people. John Deere hats, which, because they heard me talk about all the drills I'd been to, that's mainly who it was. And, you know, we're not taking our guns. This is America. I have that on footage in my Police State 2000 film and others. And they said, listen, because people complained about that, because of your films and other things, we now train with the same people, but dressed up with green makeup and stuff, and we practice mowing them down, saying they're zombies. And at that point, I'm talking to a military guy who just retired, okay? He was pretty high level. And I at dinner with another fella, and I thought, maybe these people are kooks. Like even I didn't get it at the time because he didn't get it. Then it came out, they've had all these Homeland Security, Army, Marine Corps, giant drills where they practice mowing down citizens. If they did that normally, it'd be a wake-up call. You call it a fun drill, and they're zombies. It's dehumanizing.
Sure.
But they're wearing Dallas Cowboy jerseys and the caps. Now they're just subhuman. And then that all came out in the news a few months ago, and it just blows me away. When a nurse in San Antonio 15, 16 years ago gave me documents, they were taking blood from babies at birth. I made calls. They're like, how do you have those documents? People didn't believe me. Came out a few years ago. It was true. I can't even believe this. You can't even believe it. The reality is there it is, zombies used for counterterrorism training. San Diego event, see? I mean, and look, who is it? That's men, women, and children. The DHS paper targets, $2 million worth of 5-year-old kids to shoot them. I mean, this is a nightmare. Go ahead. Talk about the spirit of these devil men, these Illuminati, and then seriously, because I know you're telling me, go ahead and talk, but I want to hear what you have to say. Go through all your slides. It's amazing.
Well, one of the things that people would say is, well, why? Why are they doing this? You know, why do they hate human beings so much? Well, I would go to the Old Testament where it says, where God actually said, all those who hate me love death. All those who hate me love death. It was during the French Revolution. They call it the Terror. In the Communist Revolution of 1917 all the way up to 1984, they call it the Red Terror. Lenin,
and now they use Al-Qaeda, they run to be our new terror.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but Al-Qaeda can be our friend or our enemy,
exactly, depending
on what suits their purposes. But let's just look, for example, at jobs. You know, depopulation is their tactic, their strategy. You say, why? We have plenty of places that are unpopulated on the earth. We don't really have a population problem, but we do. Let me explain this to you. Foxconn is the largest corporation in the world. It's a Chinese group.
Guys, pull up Suicide Nets. Just type it in. It's incredible. Go ahead. Now, but Al Gore runs it, so it's okay.
Well, Foxconn has millions of employees, has one company that has 420,000 workers. Huge combines. What do they make? They make all the iPhones that are made. All the millions of iPhones that we have in America. Yeah, well, it is slave labor. I think they make $1.67 a day. They live in dinky little rooms. They work 6 to 7 days a week. They have no unions. They have nothing. And you know, the people are so driven. The peasants that they bring in to do these jobs, to do these, you know, labor-intensive jobs, are so stricken with being a slave labor to being a drone, you might say, that they literally go to the top of the building, jump off, and kill themselves. The building supervisors have had to put nets all the way around the buildings to keep people from jumping off the building.
And when it happened, they're now doing forced abortions and drugging them at the Foxconn, which Al Gore's on Apple, and they've said, charge a few more dollars, and these people could live well. And they're like, no, it's that Apple's the most abusive, the most evil, but it's liberal, so it's okay. Yeah. I'm sorry, I interrupted. Okay. Go back to Foxconn.
Okay. Foxconn is the largest company in the world. What they do is make products for American companies. We don't make things anymore. We send the plans and designs overseas. They make millions of iPhones.
Well, that's the management under Agenda 21. I know as an engineer, you know that.
Yeah.
With the rules, we can't build here now. It's designed like that, so it's designed to move it to China, to kill them while they build it as a eugenics program. I'm sorry.
But the people are incredibly unhappy. They realize they're being used for slaves. They're killing themselves. They're claiming they're going to have mass suicides. This is embarrassing for Apple. So Apple got together with Foxconn, this huge Chinese conglomerate, says, what are we going to do about that? I'll tell you what they decided to do about it. They're going to go out and get 4 million robots.
That's what they said, yeah.
4 million robots. They've already got 1 million there, and it works out great for them. Why? Because human beings have to take leave. They have to take breaks. They get sick. They want days off.
Why the future doesn't need us.
Yeah, why the future doesn't need us. They've already got 1 million robots. It's working out so good that iPhone said, you know what? Apple said, well, we can bring one of our plants back here. We can have the robots work in America as well as over there. Now, here's the problem.
And people say, well, that's just the future. The problem is it's been engineered by a dark force with an evil architecture. Go ahead.
Well, what do you do? China, Red China, has 1 billion people. They need jobs. These were jobs. As bad off as they were, they're jobs. Now they're all being laid off. They're being told, you complain, we'll replace you with a robot.
Guys, pull up Foxconn replacing people with robots. Go ahead.
And it's an amazing thing. They already have 1 million robots. Where did they get the robots from? They got them from Fanuc Corporation, which is the largest industrial automation company in the world. Fanuc uses robots to make robots.
In fact, they say that's the goal now. General Electric, all of them, is to have robots that work on robots that work at robots. And I've already talked to top engineers. With the computers, no one engineer knows how it works. In fact, it's almost like a ghost in the machine now. It's just working. And the algorithms and the humans are already removing ourselves. And if the globalists think they're going to control this, they're wrong.
Absolutely.
So what's Satan's plan?
Well, you know, you say Satan, he's using human beings today.
To build our own destruction.
He's right there. Well, they realize that human beings are not going to be needed. You see, we now have unemployment. It is a structural unemployment. And so as robots become more and more intelligent, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, robots will be working at McDonald's. They'll be driving taxis. They'll be everywhere. It'll be ubiquitous. What do you do with all the people? Well,
and that's why they're rolling. I was about to say, get to the punchline here. That's why they're rolling out militarized things to scare you so you feel okay when the sweet ones come along. It's all a bait and switch. Oh, look, all the dangerous ones, you're going to accept that. Oh, well, these are the sweet ones. While the little sweet one, Japan's already put up Sentinel robots as a test that look like police but actually just camera platforms. And when you get into all of that, it brings up so many points, Tex. I mean, people... here's my final point. I want your take on this and then roll with it. Here's what blows me away and makes me so upset. I've seen the actuaries. They've done breakdowns that if they would just pay those people $3, $4 an hour, actually the manufacturing, the components is what cost it. The assembly humans are doing is a tiny part of it. Just a fraction of them giving up their hundreds of billions in profit for Al Gore, who's who runs it all at Apple on their board. He's the real head honcho and works with the communist Chinese. They could lift up all of China, build a livable infrastructure, empower those people for a future. But instead, they've actuaried it to make it slave labor, to make it hellish, to have it be, I mean, it is designed to destroy America and Europe and leverage us out while annihilating the poor Chinese. So what I'm saying is it's all done diabolically, yes, and then we've got to see them parade around saying it's liberal. Go ahead.
Well,
so when you got to the key, though, you were saying they're not going to need us. Go ahead.
No, they're not going to need us. As time goes on, we're going to have more and more people out of work. I expect that we'll have, now we have, what, 8%, 7 or 8%. We'll have 10%, 20%, 30%. Now, people are now being offered freebies. We can't give you a job. Well, we'll get you a phone. We'll pay your rent. We'll give you food stamps. We now have almost 50 million people on food stamps. They're going to continue those programs. But eventually they will say, what are we doing this for? Now that we've got this military industrial complex so set up that everyone is in a prison, we've got drones watching everybody. We've got their TVs watching, their refrigerators, they're watching. We've got them totally in a prison. Now, let's get rid of them. We don't need these people. They're useless eaters. And these people are psychopaths. They're psychopaths. And they give no thought at all to human beings. People think that Obama cares for the poor.
Oh, my God. The increased payroll taxes on poor.
Exactly. And so they're going to come down on all of us. But everyone listening to me out there, you think you're going to keep your job. You're not going to keep your job. It doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter what you do. In 10, 15, 20 years, there will be robots that are stronger, that are smarter, that can work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, doing your job. They can outthink you. You say, no, that's not possible. Robots don't have that kind of intelligence. They will have very soon. It's called singularity. They will not only have your intelligence, they will surpass it. And they can build thousands. Robots will build robots. It's an amazing thing. We're showing you some pictures now about what they can do. That's today. They can play instruments. They can. There are robots that look like women. They're going to be sex partners. They're going to be all kinds of robots. But believe me, they will take your job. What are they going to do with you? What's going to be done with the millions of human beings?
No, they've told us, Tex, what they're going to do. And again, this is not our opinion, our projection, your analysis. All the globalists have written countless books. You can source them. Sure. I know you're going to cover them in your book because that's what you do. They're telling us this is a foregone conclusion. Mm-hmm. And all the big rich people go to Ray Kurzweil events with world leaders and William Shatner, and they're all being told, go along with this, you'll be part of it.
Oh, yeah.
All the rest of us, bioweapon.
Well, technology is not bad.
It's like a gun.
Exactly.
But it's whose hand it's in.
Well, Asimov, was a great writer of science fiction. He created the 3 laws of robots. Basically, the 3 laws of robots ensure, if they're programmed into robots, that robots will take care of human beings. They will tend to us. They will, guard us and all these things. But it's how you program the robots. I'm not worried about robots overtaking us. I'm not worried about
It's the elite that control them.
Exactly.
That's how they take out humans out of the equation. But expanding on that, his even better books as a visionary, written in the 40s, I think, were the Foundation series, which I know you probably read. Mm-hmm. They were the Hugo winner and a lot of other stuff. And in that, they create computer systems that can predict off mass movements, off tracking all the data and your actions with computer chips, before they even had chips, that to then feed into a master system for future prediction of over 90%. They now have it. Isaac Asimov's understanding, which we know others basically fed him a lot of it, was their master plan. And again, how did H.G. Wells in, say, 1900 write about atomic bombs when the equations didn't exist?
Yeah.
What's happening there?
Well, the elite meet constantly. We know about the secret meetings of the Bohemian Grove, of the Skull and Bones, of the Council on Foreign Relations, and all the other groups that meet. They meet and they plan out and they decide what they're going to do to our lives. These are not meetings that we're privileged.
Did you see Bloomberg? 2 days ago, I meant to even cover this. I haven't. I've mentioned it. He said, I use mathematics and science to control things. I will decide what you eat. And he was explaining how he loves us and how, and it was like how he's this wonderful genius. And it said that he will run our life. Guys, pull up Bloomberg. It's in the article. Bloomberg said he prepared for the next massacre. And in it, it's all how he would control. I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm backing you up.
Well, think about that. He prepared for the next massacre. He knew one was going to occur. And he said, let's all be ready for it. I mean, just like...
It's more than that. They were staged. I can look at it.
Just like 9/11.
I'm not just saying that. They were both staged. Aurora's 100%.
Of course. And we go back to 9/11, and they had everything ready for us. Remember that film that came on TV over and over again of those commandos of Osama bin Laden jumping over those obstruction things, and over and over and over again. It was exactly like
and they rolled that right before it happened. Again, I mean, look at Aurora. Under Air Force top psychiatrist from an entire base in San Antonio, transferred to spend 4 or 5 hours a week with this one guy. A high-level officer with him. He gets $30-something from DARPA in a human mind interface program. He's on 7 drugs, and now they're going to give him truth serum to make him admit he did the murder alone, which is actually, when you're under that kind of mind control, as you know, puts you back under it. So now in the Denver Post, they're going to drug him for the trial with the truth serum to make him go back into the personality, because he told folks in the jail for the 2 days, I don't remember anything, I'm under control. And then they said he wasn't with people in a jail. The problem was they'd admitted he was in the jail. I mean, and you look at it, they did the whole thing. I mean, that one, we really caught him. Just like Sirhan, it came out, didn't shoot any of the bullets and was under a truth serum drug, which can also be used as a hypnotic drug. It's not really a truth serum. It makes you highly suggestible where you'll say whatever they want. Go ahead.
Well, they're driving us through these things. Yeah. They're driving us. They're planning them. They're executing them. And you know, and it's just like 1984. At one moment, you know, Oceania is our enemy. The next day, they're our friend. You know, the Al-Qaeda of Syria are now our pals, our buddies, now that they're after Assad. But once they get in, then they'll be our enemies again. They'll bring turmoil and chaos. That's really the whole goal in the Middle East, to bring destabilization, to bring chaos into those governments. We don't want a stable government in Iraq. We don't want one in Afghanistan. We don't want them in Syria or Libya. We want all the turmoil, all the chaos, because, you know, the elite, they advance through chaos. They've done it in World War I, World War II.
They did it, as you said, the Jacobins, the Illuminati Revolution is really what that was. You're a really smart guy, a visionary, and in so many ways. I mean, you know, proof 20 million books sold or whatever, and predicting so much that happened. I'm not just saying that. It's on record for folks that don't know who you are. Most people will. Let me ask you this. What do you think is going to happen in God's plan, how it unfolds? Because I was already a Christian. I've had spiritual experiences, but I'm as wicked as the day is long, and my works are dirty rags. You know, I mean, my heart's good, but the flesh is strong. You know, the spirit is there, but the flesh is strong.
Sure, that's true of all of us.
Exactly, but at the same time, now you really know. Either Revelation, Daniel, the whole Bible's real, and it's been proven over and over again by archaeology, or guys were in a time machine and came here and saw this, or evil people are using it as a template, but there's no way people 3,000, 2,000 years ago could come up with all this. What's really going to happen? I mean, it's you know, we're told there's a rapture, so Christians all stand down. When did Christians get raptured in the Bible? I mean, what text, bottom line, where's it all going? What's going to happen?
Well, we have to go to the book of Revelation. And I think it's all in there. The book of Daniel is important.
Break down what's going to happen.
Well, you know, we're seeing it now. We're seeing a cashless society. We're seeing robots that will take over for men. That's in Revelation 13. You know, we're going to see wars where androids, cyborgs, and human beings all conflict with each other. You won't know who the human being is, or the cyborg, or whatever. But it's interesting that the Bible talks about these creatures, and they're not human beings. They're like locusts, but they're like scorpions. They have they hurt people in their tails, and there's all kinds of strange creatures in the Bible. And now, up to our generation, we couldn't understand these things. How can these strange animal creatures do these things? Where are these creatures? We haven't seen them anywhere of all the animal species on Earth. But if you look at what the military is developing, there they are. There's the alpha dog. Look at the picture of the alpha dog. He's as big as 10 human beings. He can run 20 miles to track you. He's called the alpha dog by the Army. There's the cheetah. Why is he called cheetah? He's so fast. He's as fast, 3 or 4 times as fast as a human. He's gonna track you down. He's gonna hunt you. And he's going to kill you.
Well, here's an example. They have all these movies where humans go to outer space. All this happens. It's going to be great. But they've decided no human space program now. It's all going to be robots. And Kurzweil and all of them say we're going to merge with the machines. And he goes, I don't believe in God yet. I will become God. And they all believe this. Here's the thing. They've decided it's over for everybody. They've decided your course, my children's course. And you read the Bible, it says the elite will throw their gold in the streets. They'll try to hide under mountains. They're all going to get cheated, aren't they?
Well, they are, because they will go too far. They will all go too far in what they're doing. I see this of Obama. I saw it of Bush. They will all go too far in what they're doing. They first of all, they underestimate you and I. Well, you've got this program. You're at way over 100 stations. I mean, this is not, somebody didn't come one day and say, I like your program, Alex. I'm going to give you 600 stations. That's the way they did Rush Limbaugh. That's the way they did Sean Hannity. You did it by, force of nature, God's help. Really.
Well, I was about to say, they have artificial intelligence. We have spiritual discernment and providence. We have the creator of the universe beaming us information.
Absolutely. People ask me all the time, how are you still alive? I would ask that of you. I think it's God. I think providence.
No, I know it is.
Absolutely.
It's my grandmother praying for me in South Austin.
There you go. There you go. I met your mom and dad. They're wonderful Christian people. And I don't think God is going to let anything happen to us. Remember, God is in control.
Well, if I do get killed or you get killed, there's an overall mission in that. We don't want to die. Yeah. We want to keep doing our work. But deep down, I'm not even afraid of getting killed. I'm afraid of that I didn't do a good job yet. I want to really expose things. I want to learn how to shut up during an interview. Anyways, no. Sure, but I mean, it's that I think it also takes their power when you just give up, just give in, and just say, God, it's in your hands. I mean, isn't that a powerful release? Because people think I'm trying to scare them. I'm trying to get people to take action. I'm not trying to scare them because I've given up my fear. I've just said, you know what? It's in your hands. Wow. But then people hear the show and they go, I'm scared. Well, you should be scared not to fight this.
Well, it's like the robots. They're going to take our jobs. The Bible says...
Yeah, there's no future if we don't beat this. What's the point of laying down to it? I mean...
Well, Jesus Christ himself said, do not fear the man who can take your life. Fear the one who can take your life and your soul. They can't take our soul, Alex.
We've got to give it up.
We don't have to give it up. We're not going to give it up.
No, exactly what I'm saying is we have God. Well, I mean, because you're a pastor as well as all the other PhDs and all the rest of it. What about the issue of where it talks about in the Bible they trafficked in men's souls in the end days?
Well, that's Revelation 18. I think that's where we're into. If people want to know what age we're into, it's Revelation 18. There we see Mystery Babylon the Great. But it's a great trading empire. It's free trade.
That's how it controls. Yeah, in fact, you were trying to get into the alchemy, the witchcraft of it. Get into that.
Yeah. Well, the alchemy, it says in Revelation 18 that everything is traded. All of the goods that you can imagine are traded from nation to nation freely. It's free trade. And it says even the souls of men are traded. Think about that. After talking about all of these, the perfumes, the merchandise, everything is traded. And look at the stock market and the DAX, and we've got all of these markets all over the world, but they're trading the souls of men. I think that's interesting. They literally have the souls of men.
Man, I tell you, okay, keep going, Tex, and then we're going to go to break and come back with Ted Anderson with financial news. Get over all the points that after this interview's over you wish you would have covered with all my digressing.
Well, I think you put your finger on it in that article in your magazine, InfoWars. It's a shame you can't send out that first issue again, where it had Rise of the Robots, the end of humanity. You know, I have a quote by Dr. Paul Safa of Stanford University. Here, I want people to get this in their mind and to really, you know, rumble it around. When the things we're talking about are so fantastic today. It just seems like incredible. But listen to this. He said the truly interesting question is, what happens after we have truly intelligent robots? Truly intelligent robots that surpass human beings, that have different materials. They're not the metallic, clunky machines. They're truly intelligent robots. What happens after we have them? He says, if we're lucky, they'll treat us as pets. If we're not lucky, they'll treat us as food. Now, why would a professor at Stanford University, one of the...
That's what there will be an energy situation. And if they're pre-programmed to survive off eating humans, as the Pentagon's doing, oh my God, it's just...
I think these robots are going to build millions of them. We're not talking about
billions. Well, here's the thing. You know about this as a futurist and space and aeronautics professor and everything else from University of Texas and best-selling author. I'm not kissing your hind end, but I mean, you really are one of the main minds. You've got all these schools of knowledge and history and being in the military and all the rest of it. But there's no way this plan came out of humans. I mean, this is the devil. I mean, if the devil wasn't even...
what you mean.
I mean, I would say this to an atheist. Even if there wasn't a spiritual devil, we're building one. I mean, this thing is Satan. Everything. I mean, it's beyond anything you could imagine.
It's orchestrated.
My gut gets not chills of fear, chills of like, I mean, you know, my spirit, your spirit can feel it. I mean, this is danger approaching, tentacles growing in all around us.
Alex, you know, sometime I listen to you on the radio. And, you know, you're ranting and you're raving. But listen, you make perfect sense. You make perfect sense. I told Wanda, I said, you know, Alex is ingenious in what he's saying. If you weren't out here, the people would have no one that they could listen to that makes sense. We're trying to make sense. I wrote this book, Robot Alchemy, to explain to people what's happening with the computer and robot revolutions, where it's all headed. We're just talking about 10, 15, 20 years down the pike. But until then, they're busy developing what I call the digital prison. Everything around us is a prison. We're going to have to break out of it. I mean, this is the bottom line, Alex. We're going to have to break out of this prison. We're going to have to, yes, keep our guns. We're going to have to keep our heads. We're going to have to say, okay, this is what they're doing now. What are we going to do to stop it?
This is humanity's great test.
It is.
This is, and
there you go.
And think of how few of us there were 20 years ago, 10 years ago. The numbers are growing, and as everything we talked about comes true, as people see that it's not a dark side, it's all evil,
absolutely,
then the credibility will rise, and what matters is then they'll get their soul right, and that's what matters is eternity.
Well, it is for eternity, and I'm so glad as we're ending this program, I'm glad you're talking about what really matters, what really counts to people. But, you know, until that moment comes, when we're taken out of the world or whatever happens to us or Jesus returns, I think we've got a big responsibility here to educate people, to make people, to help them to understand these things. That's what I'm all about. That's what you're all about. That's the only reason we're here, is to do that. And I think that you know, it seems to me you're going deeper and deeper into technology, the technology of the prison. This is a prison.
It's a labyrinth.
Yeah. You know, when I was a young man, we had all the liberty in the world. I mean, if you think back to the way it was, you know, when you were just a young lad, and today, everything. I'm afraid that the youth of today don't see it that way. They're going to be in prison and think that it's normal. They will. They'll think everything is normal. They're going to be, you know, getting a chip. They're ready for it. Boy, they're going to line up for it.
But the cancer and all the other things are just exploding as they soft kill us on the bioweapon end. But it's always like Dr. Nick Begich says. He goes, look, the bio is small. It's important compared to the electronic. And that's where the main focus is.
The key is they don't need us. They don't need.
And they say they want to get rid of us.
And they want to get rid of us. We're useless eaters. They've got to get rid of us. Now, a lot of people are fighting for immigration and all these things, and that's all great. But the biggest issue of the day is the prison system, the planet prison that we're in. And we're
the big issue is they want us all fighting with each other over issues, which are real, so we've got to deal with them. Right. But overall, there is a unified... I had Rothkopf on about 5-6 years ago. I saw he had a book out, The Superclass, for world government, in the Washington Post. So they do book tours. We call, we get them on. The listeners always ask, how'd you get that guest? Well, when people have a book out, they'll come on. And tell other talk shows, we can't seem to figure that out there, how to get guests. So I get him on. He actually knew who I was. And during the break, I'm like, why are you coming on? I'm going to yell. He goes, well, I think I can convince you. He goes, yeah, there's 6,000 superclass that serve about 20 families. And during the break, he's like, the board ops heard it. He goes, you're kind of the superclass and the conspiracy thing. Alex, you ought to. And then, of course, later I called him. He won't come back on now because I didn't, at least come his direction a little. Because they always say, you're real smart. Come along with us. That's kind of, the public's kind of, But Rothkopf on air just admitted all this, but they put it in a good light. But if you put it in a bad light, then it doesn't exist and you're bad. But we're talking about 20 families or so. We're talking about maybe 6,000 superclass servants. I agree with him. And they're building a hellish world. So what would you say to the, quote, superclass people? Because everything I know about history, but also my gut and my spirit says they're going to have the worst lot in all this. And the reason they're unfulfilled and unhappy, a lot of them, is because they're not helping people. And it doesn't mean you can't take care of yourself, but just this idea that because you can lie to people and you can figure out how things work, and instead of figuring out how things work and then trying to teach others, they figure out how it works and then want to dumb people down to control them.
Whether they're communist or whether they're capitalist, it doesn't matter. They all work together. This is the way it's always happened. The capitalists help the communist, and the communists help the capitalist, and it's all a big thing. Solzhenitsyn said, has it ever struck you as odd that the capitalists help the communist? There's really only one class among the elite. And maybe there are 6,000, but there are many more thousand that are willing servants that are so ambitious.
Yeah, 6,000 super gophers.
Now, you've set yourself against these people. I can see that. You've set yourself against these people. I think they're trying to figure out what to do. One thing that our founding fathers gave us was that Bill of Rights. We still have vestiges of it. We need to hang on to it like a tattered
Well, you
document.
always ask that question about why aren't we dead, or what are they going to do with you? Because you've known me for a long time. My parents, you married my wife and I mean, I'm for real. The enemy wants to say he's not real because they don't want people to think they're real. The truth is these are men we're fighting. They've got the devil. We're men. We're women. We've got God. I mean, we need to realize we've got the power. The world's being turned over evil because we stand down. So answer that question. What do you think the establishment's thinking about your work, my work, all of us?
Well, first of all, they say, that Alex Jones, Tex Mars are uncouth or stupid or whatever, but they know that's not true. They see what you've done on your own. They know I've written 46 books. They can't duplicate that. They're trying to figure out how to stop us, how to embarrass you, how to throw things in the machine to stop us. To stop InfoWars. But I think the Bible really has their number. It does say that, just as you said in James, the book of James. It says, listen up, you rich men. You're going to howl in your miseries. You're going to throw your silver and your gold into the street. And the just people that complain to you about their wages and you killed, you're going to answer for. Now, I'm paraphrasing it, but that's what it says. It says the just people. They complained about their wages.
I think that's almost a perfect quote.
You held back the money from their wages. You did it illegally to feather your own nest or whatever. It says, you're going to have to pay for this. That's what James said. But James also said something. He said, don't say to yourself, I'm going to go tomorrow and do this. I'm going to go tomorrow and do that. Say, if God wills, I will do this. And I've always found that very a great... what would you call it, a motto or thing to live by? Do whatever God says. People say to me, what are you going to do next? Well, I'm going to do whatever God says I'm going to do. And that's all I'm going to do, unless they take me away. And if they take me away, I'm going to continue to do whatever God says. And that's always stood by me very well. And I hope it'll stand by you too, Alex.
PowerProphecy.com. People can also call and get it's not a news, it's really a magazine, really nice newsletter. Tell people about some of the stuff.
Well, they can go to PowerOfProphecy.com. Of course, our TexMars.com.
You've got a Liberty and Truth conference coming up with Jim Marrs, a bunch of other people.
Yeah, Jim Marrs, a lot of great people. I hope people go to this January the 7th. They can, January the 6th, excuse me. They'll see about that on our website. By the way, I want to mention this book, Robot Alchemy, will not be out. This is the premiere. I mean, nobody in the world knows about this book except InfoWars and you right now today. So this book will not be out until about April the 20th. So people have about 6 weeks to think about it. Maybe they'll want the book, maybe not. But Robot Alchemy will be out in about 6 weeks. This was really the
well, I'm honored.
Well, I wanted to do that, and Alex, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate everything you're doing here to warn folks.
Thank you so much. God bless you and Wanda.
God bless you too.
You bet, buddy. And again, that's PowerOfProphecy.com. Our site's Infowars.com, and we have the video streams at PrisonPlanet.tv. And that's it for tonight's edition. But the restream with the start of the show with Jakari Jackson sitting here in the chair doing the nightly news. He did a great job. So did the crew. Is coming up in just a moment when the show ends. And again, the archive is always posted a few hours after up at PrisonPlanet.tv. And don't forget, $5.95 a month is 11 subscriptions. I really said 10, but you get your own membership, and then 10 more can simultaneously log in at PrisonPlanet.tv. And again, the crew, I salute you. Their only fault is they try to do too good a job and do too much, and we get overwhelmed. But it's better to attempt too much and succeed at a lot than just sit on our hind ends and fail. So God bless you all, and Lord willing, we'll see you back tomorrow night for another edition of InfoWars Nightly News.